This is Gemara Pesachim Daf Kuf Tes. Tonight's year should be a schus for a shleimer from many ben vegel chaim ben sar shalom Stephen Rizeli Tolzar Bas Knendel. Ita Basi and Bas Chaysa Yisrael ben Mendel. Ezer Pertz with Chevrolet Shalom Bas Naomi Bashafiq Chana Rafal David Nitri Vishmol Ben Til Dinim Chan Rezel Melchai Bas Mina Livrach Bas Tavia Musa Din Ida Bas Shin Mendel Besay Shar Chayli Yisrael. We pick it up on the bottom of Kuf Ches Amid Beis Tanu Rabbanan. As we head into the final 2 weeks of Gemara Pesachim, the final 2 weeks, which we're going to get involved in a lot more of the inyanim of the Seder. Tomorrow we're going to have a bit of a Gadata, and then Emir Hashem, very, very soon, we'll be concluding Emir Hashem, this wonderful Masechta. We pick it up 3 lines from the bottom. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan. The last word of the line, Tanu Rabbanan. Kov Chesamid Beis. Hakol Chayavin Barbal Koises Alalu. Everyone is obligated, something that we already started seeing, yesterday, that everyone is obligated in drinking the Dalit Koises, Echad Anoshim, Echad Noshim, men and women, Echad Tinoi Kois, and children. Amar Rav Yehuda, says Rav Yehuda, what purpose is there for children to be drinking wine? Ella, which, let's first read the Gemara. Ella mechalkin lahem, rather, instead of the children drinking wine, rather we should distribute to them as we move along to Kovtesim and Beis, Kalayos ve'egoizim b'Erev Pesach. We give them nuts and shells and husks, different delicacies that they had. These were, I guess, the candies of their times. We definitely don't recommend doing this nowadays. We sort of go for more the candy variety, kedei shelo yishanu, so that the children do not fall asleep, v'yishalu, and they ask questions. And that's going to be the theme, which of course we all know about the Leil Seder. And here we see it in the Gemara, Daf Koftes says the Gemara, that instead of the children drinking wine, what usage of it is they're drinking wine, rather we give them sweets and candies and different interesting things so they don't fall asleep, and we keep them awake, as the Leil Seder is very important and integral that their children should be there. Just to mention that it's a bit of the Mefarshim here take issue with exactly what was the sequence of the Gemara. The Gemara said men, women, and children are obligated. The Gemara asked, what point is there for children? What's the question? They have a din of chinuch, the regular din of chinuch that obligates them to do all other mitzvahs. So why here would it be any different? The Rashbam, interestingly enough, says they're peturim in our mitzvahs. Okay, but they have a chiv of chinuch. And if the answer is that no, it's that we should do something to keep them awake, what was the Havamina? The Rishonim over here deal with exactly what was the shakla v'tari of the Gemara. But for now, what we see is very important is that even children, we have to keep them awake. We want to keep them involved during the Leil Seder. Their klayos v'agayzim, the nuts and the shells and the husks, dried wheat, as Rashi says, or candies in conventional times. Amru Lav al Rabbi, says the Gemara, Amru Lav Rabbi Akiva, 2 lines on the top. Shei machali klayos v'agayzim the tinaykes b'Erev Pesach. Rav Akiva himself will give out to the children kidei shel yishanu, so they don't fall asleep. Yishalu, and they're able to ask the questions, which is of course the whole theme of Leil Seder is the questions and answers, because that turns on the mind and that makes one think. And that makes it inculcated into their being, which of course is one of the reasons which we're going to see, is that when you have, say, the Manishtana, even if there's no children, adults say it, because the best way to put something into the system is via a question and answer. Here we're seeing that we're giving them klayos ve'agayzim, we're giving them treats so the children stay awake. Tanya, we learned in the Reis, Rav Eliezer, Aimer choitzvim matzos b'leilei Pesachim, which literally means we grab the matzos on the night of Pesach. Why? Bishvil tinaykos, for the children, shlo yishanu, so they don't sleep. What's interesting here is the Rashbam and Rashi both have multiple pshatim in what exactly this means, and none of them are like we're all thinking chayt v'matzos, meaning that you grab the afikaimim. The Rashbam over here, the Rashbam is about 12 lines into the lines of the Rashbam. Chayt v'matzos, says the Rashbam, magvin es hakayra b'shel shatinayis, we pick up the Seder plate so that the children will ask questions. That's one pshat. Looks interesting. A second pshat, says the Rashbam, Mishmavarshi, chayt v'matzos oichlen mayer, you eat very quickly, oichlen mayer. Rashi says. And the Rashbam gives some say matzos magbiyan as akarko. We pick up the plate shishbem matzah mitzvahs magbiyan she matzah and mar on them. Veliner, says the Rashbam, that choitvin misalkin is alecha miyana tinaykis. We take the food away from the children. Don't let them eat too much. Why? So they shouldn't sleep. You have a lot of food. You're filled up. You fall asleep, and we want the kids to stay awake. So we're choitvin. We grab the food from them. An interesting pshat. So like children generally fall asleep after they eat, and then they're not going to ask the questions. And we grab the matzah from them. They're not going to fall asleep. And they'll ask the questions. What does that mean? They're not going to be full. They're going to see everything strange. They'll ask questions. And that is how the Rashbam learns. And of course, but we do know that there are those who definitely have a minhag to grab the matzah. One definitely should be careful with such a thing. But again, we keep on seeing the theme that we want to keep the children awake. Says the Gemara Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, 7 lines down. He never told everyone, guys, time to get up from Beis Medrash. No more learning. He never told them that. Which Rosh Hashiva tells the Talmidim to stop learning. Chotz aside for 2 times in the year. Ma'arvei Pesachim, the Erev Yom Kippurim. Why? Be'erev Pesach, V'shoti Naikish Yishanu. You got to start the Seder right away. We don't want the kids falling asleep, so get out of here. Go home, start the meal, start the Seder. Be'erev Yom Kippurim, they shachlu es b'neim, so that they feed their children the special mitzvah to eat on Erev Pesach, and in order that everyone has enough food to eat on Erev Pesach. And the Rashbam points out that we don't want the kids to fall asleep during the Haggadah. Let's continue. Tanu Rabbanan. So again, 3 different Mekayers that we're seeing. We distribute Klayos Ve'Gaizim. We see Rabbi Kiva did such. We see that we're grabbing the matzah, which we're learning means to pick up the kaira, or it means to take the food away from the kids. And we're seeing that this is the one time that Rabbi Kiva told them to leave the Beis Medrash so that they can start the Seder so kids stay awake. Tanu Rabbanan. Chayiv Adam L'Sameach Banav V'nei Beis Regel. Chayiv. We know the word Chayiv usually connotes a din da'araisa. That is a point which is debated here by the Rishonim. But says the Gemara, Chayiv, one is obligated to rejoice with his children and his bnei beisa, his wife and his children on Yantiv Shneimar, showing it's a deraisa, proof from the pasuk, V'samachta b'chagecha, b'ma misamchim, with what do you rejoice? B'yayin, with wine, says the Tanakama. Rav Yehuda Aimer, Anoshim b'rayilem, Anoshim b'rayilem. Men get what they need and women get what they need. Anoshim, what do men need? For them b'yayin, wine. V'noshim b'mai, what do women need? Tani Rav Yisrael says, V'bavel, the big disavayin. In Babel, we used to give them colorful clothing, pretty dress for Yantif. Beretz Yisrael, big day pishta, miguatzim, a special launder type of clothing. Again, each place according to that which we need, and we see that it's supposed to be catered to the person. If someone likes type A, you give them type A. If someone likes type B, you give them type B. But we see it's an obligation on every person to ensure that his wife and children have something special for Yantif. Tanya, we learned to the rise of Yidum Beseira Omer. Bismach Beis Hamikdash Kaim Ein Simcha Elo B'Basar. When we had a Beis Hamikdash, what was the Simcha? Basar, Karbana Yishnamar Zavachta Shlamim V'Chalta Sham. You bring the Shlamim, you slaughter the Shlamim, and you eat it there. And you rejoice in front of God. And now, we no longer, unfortunately, have the Beis Hamikdash. It says in the Torah, and with wine we rejoice the heart of man. And the truth is, most Paiskim hold you really can be yaitz to this din even with grape juice, because we know that grape juice is a din of yayin for all dinim, and therefore no one should think that you have to get drunk over here. You have to have a type of yayin which, according to many Paiskim or some Zalman for sure, can be done with grape juice. There are those who say that should be intoxicating at some level, but again, it doesn't mean that one gets drunk. It's not Purim. This is Pesach. It just means that one drinks to gladden the heart, a nice festive Yontif Suda. Amar Rav Yitzchak. Kasta de Marisa, this Kasta de Marisa, which is a certain measuring utensil of the fish fats, the Haviyah B'Tzipari that we had in Tzipari, he have his Kimin Luga. The size of this measuring utensil was the size of a lug dimiket dasha in the Beis Hamikdash. Why do we care about that? Says the Gemara, Uba Misharim Raviyah Shal Pesach. And once you know what a lug is, 4 Raviyahs equals 1 lug. And that's how they would measure the Raviyahs for the Leil Seder. They would utilize this utensil. They would take it, and with that, they would be able to know 4 of them equal to a 1/4 of it, I should say, was a Raviyahs. Rav Yochanan Timnasa Kadmaisa. Similarly, which is, says Rav Yochanan, the original measuring utensils, that we had in Tveria, Havis Yisera al da Riva, is larger than the utensil we have done now. Riva, it's 1 Revius larger. So Uba Meshayin Revius Shabazach, so they would take the original utensil and then they would measure with the small utensil, and the differential obviously would be a Revius. That's how they would measure the Revius for the Leil Seder. Amar Rav Chisda, says Rav Chisda, continuing, what is a Revius? Revius shel Torah is how much? Etzbayim al etzbayim, barum etzbayim, 2 fingers width by 2 fingers width, in the depth of 2 fingers width, 2 by 2, by etzbayim, 2 fingers, v'chatzi etzba, and a half of a finger, v'chaimish etzba, and a fifth of a finger, 2 and a half, and a fifth, 2 7/10 of finger widths is the third measurement. So 2 by 2 and 2 7/10. Kiritania, as a brisa says, v'rachatz b'mayim es kol b'sarai. You have to wash your entire body in the mikvah. What's that? Before you go there, just we'll point out, this is the big marmaka, and this is the big source for the whole big, I shouldn't say controversy, more of a debate, how large a revius is. Like we mentioned in the previous days, we said Ramesha is a 3.3 ounces, and the Chazon Ish is more like 5 point something ounces, and we said that for Daraisas, at the first case, you should try to have 5 point something ounces. For the other cases at Darabanan, you try to have 3.3, and we said the Maila, the Iker, is to drink the whole thing. If the ant, you drink Rive. If you can't, you drink Mali Lugmav, which is the Rive. But this all comes from this Gemara measuring that Tzbayis, and the big discussion is, do we say that fingers changed Mishana Etzbayis, Mishana Beitzais? Do we say that the Shiurim changed from this man Chazal? This is the big discussion. Rav Chaim Nahum, the Chazon Ish, and all the big Paiskim trying to figure out the size of the Shiurim, and that's the reason there's the famous Naid Yehuda that says you have to double all the Shiurim in order because the Shiurim changed. But that's the reason why. There's to know where it all starts from. That's why we'll have such a tremendous discrepancy, almost double the size. Like we said, Ramesh is 3.3 and the Chazon Ish is close to 6. Such a tremendous discrepancy in Shiurim is all trying to figure out from this Gemara that it says you measure your fingers, how does that translate into contemporary society? But let's just continue the Gemara. Kidatanya, the Brisa says, V'rachas b'mayim es kol b'sarai. You should wash your entire body in the water. That's referring to obviously going to the mikvah. Says the Gemara 3 lines from the bottom. You should have nothing interposing, nothing separating between your flesh and the water. What does it mean, nothing between you and the water? It means you and the waters of the mikvah. It's kol b'sara, your entire flesh. You have to have water the entire body could fit into. This hopefully should sound familiar. We had this in the Gemara at Eruvin already, and says the Gemara v'kamahin. And how large is this area that your whole body can fit in? As we turn along to Kuftasim and Beis, Amma al Amma barum shalosh amais, 1 Amma by 1 Amma by 3 Amais, which we know means, as the Gemara, which translates into 40 sa. 1 by 1 by 3 equals 40 sa. And the way that you get to this, obviously, is by measuring how big the amma is, which obviously comes from how big the finger widths are. And that's the reason why this comes up this Gemara. As you see from the top Rashi over here, quite a tremendous Rashi, quite a tremendous Rashbam over here, which comes to prove how large everything is. We're not going to go through all the measurements. Just to point out, the Rashbam says what we just spoke out. Says the Rashbam, the first Rashbam, the vessel has to be filled with water, by Adam, that a person toivels in, immerses in. So what's it doing here? Umina, and from Yalfinan, from the measurement of 40 sa, meaning from the fact that 1 by 1 by 3 equals 40 sa, if you do the math, you then can figure out how large a revius is, and that is where the Gemara here is coming from. Basically, to prove the statement of Rav Chisda that a revius is 2 etzbayis by 2 fingers width by 2 fingers width by 2 7/10 fingers width, which equals 1 by 1 by 3 amos, which equals 40 sa. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Ashi, says Rav Ashi, Amar li Rabin bar Chanina, says Rav Chanina, Shulchan shal Mikdash, the Shulchan, the shulchan that held the lechem upon him in the Beis Hamikdash, shall brakim avai. Says Rav Ashi, it must be that it came apart. It must be the pieces wasn't one piece of material, but rather you have to dismantle it. Why? Because if you think that it's one piece, that it's all one piece, how are you going to be able to taivel it? Because it's 1 amma. We just said, how big is a mikvah? 1 amma by 1 amma by 3 ammas. So it's 1 by 1 by 3 deep. And if the shulchan itself was 1 amma, an item that is 1 amma cannot fit into a mikvah, which is 1 amma. So says Rav Ashi, it must be that the shulchan was able to be taken apart. Because if it wasn't able to be taken apart, how would they table it in the event that it became an event that it became Tami. Says the Gemara, no, it's no proof. Why is it no proof? My kushya, what's your problem? Dilma biyam shasa shleimei abim hatvil. Something else that we saw in the Gemara in Eruvin. Maybe in the ocean that Shlomo Melech made, that's where they would table it. The Tani Rav Chia, as Rav Chia taught us, Yam Shas Shlomo Machzik Meyav Achamshin Mikvah Taira was large enough to hold 150 Mikvahs Taira, quite a tremendous body of water that Shlomo Melech created, and therefore maybe that's where they titled the Shulchan of the Beis HaMikdash. So it's not necessarily a proof that it was something that was not able to be taken apart. I'm sorry, that it had to be taken apart. Maybe it was one piece, and they had this tremendous mikvah of Shlomo HaMelech. Again, before we go into the next Gemara, what's important to remember is that number one, this is the big marmakim of shiurim, as we see over here, that it all has to do with the etzba'is, and different gedalim, different bais can measure their finger and try to figure out if things change, if things did not change. Similarly, with measuring the size of the beya, of the egg. And over here we learned that what is a revi is 2 etzba'is by 2 etzba'is by 2 7/10 etzba'is, which the Gemara says from the fact that we know that a mikvah, which is 40 sa, which is 1 amma by 1 amma by 3 ammas deep, thereby we could translate that to teach us how big a revi is, which would equal 2 by 2 by 2 7/10. Let's begin the next Gemara. Lo yivchas loy me'arba, and you cannot have less than the Dalit Concise on the Leil of the Seder. The Dalit Concise that we started the parak off with, Dalit Concise that we've been discussing the last few days, the first one being Deraisa 2 to Kiddush, the latter 3 being Derabanan, the mitzvah Derabanan of drinking the Dalit Concise. We saw in the very beginning of the parak that the 4 Lashonos of Geula, that the first Rashbam, I believe, and Rashi in the parak brought down Rashbam de Rimasal Arba Kaises, and the first Rashbam over here both pointed out that what is that it comes from the 4 Lashonos of Gula, V'Aseiti V'Itzalti V'Galti V'Lakachti. That's where we get the 4 Lashonos. We saw in the Mishnah that even an ani has to be supported by giving the Dalit Kaises. And finally, the Rashbam pointed out that if the ani doesn't get the Dalit Kaises from the collection, he has to sell himself, rent himself out, or even sell his clothing. We see the extreme importance of the Dalit Kaises. But now says the Gemara, a fundamental issue with the number 4. Asks the Gemara, how could it be, like we just said, it's a din Rabbanan? How could the Rabbanan have created something that could harm you? What could harm you? We learned in a brayso, tray. You should never eat something in pairs of 2. This is the concept of zugais. This is the concept, perhaps a mystical, perhaps a Kabbalistic concept, that you should never do anything in pairs. It is true that nowadays we are not generally, Ashkenazim in general, Sephardim Samar, are not makbid on these type of things in zugais. And already, I believe, Taisus in, I think it was Yuma, I forgot right now, perhaps Ayin Tes, already points out that Bisman Hazeh, we are not makbid on this concept of zugais. But again, what is the concept of zugais? In a very simple way, without getting involved in the Kabbalistic aspect of it, it means you shouldn't do anything in 2. As we'll see in the Gemara right now. Lo yechel adam tray, you should not eat 2 things at a time. You should not drink 2 at a time. You should not wipe yourself 2 times in a row when you go to the bathroom. You should not do your bodily needs 2 times, which Rashbam and Rashi point out. This refers to Tasha Shamita, man sleeping with his wife. So what do we see? We see that you should not do anything in 2s. So ask the Gemara. So 4 is divisible by 2. So seemingly, how can you create the Dalit Kaisais? That's a danger. Anything in 2s. 2 Kaises and 2 Kaises and 4. And that's a danger. It should have been 1, 3, or 5, or 7. It should never be divisible by 2. So ask the Gemara, how did Chazal create this concept of Dalit Kaisais that could harm you? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Kra, very fundamental tarets, very known tarets. Leil Shimurim, the night of the Seder, is the garden night. Leil HaMeshumar Ubam and HaMazikin, which is night that is guarded from Mazikin, from spiritual dangers, and therefore Zugais are spiritual dangers, and therefore we don't have to worry about it. Just to point out, there are places that come from here that say that it's a night that's guarded from Mazikin. It's not the night that's guarded from everything else. That's the reason why perhaps we only say the first parsha of Kriya Shema. We don't have to say maybe all the parshas of Kriya Shema, etc. But for example, some people ask, do I have to lock my front door? It's Leil HaMeshumar, we're being watched. It's true, you're being watched from Mazikin. It doesn't say you're being watched from ganavim. So yes, you should lock your front door, and that's really where it comes from over here, that it's ba min hamezikin, from the spiritual dangers. That's teretz number 1 of the Gemara. Teretz number 2, 3 lines from the bottom. Rava Omar, koishal bracha mitzaref l'taiva. Whenever you have a koishal bracha, whenever you have a mitzvah, a koishal blessing, it combines for the good of a mitzaref l'ra. Can never have an issue of zugais when it comes to koishal bracha. Ravina Omar, third teretz, arba kasi takin rabbanan. The Chazal created 4 cups, derech chayris, for the form of chayris, of freedom, and kol chad v'chad, each and every one of them, as we move along to Kaf Yudam Abiz and finish off today's daf, mitzvah v'apei nafshehu, is its own mitzvah. Meaning, it's true at the end of the day there are 4, like we said, the 4 lashonos of Geula. But they created derech chayris, but each one is its own mitzvah, and like Rashi in the top, Rashi here points out, they do not combine one with the other, and therefore we do not have to worry about the concept of zugais. Let's just see 3 more lines, and then we'll call it a day. Lo yases rachav trei. One should not sleep with his wife 2 times in a row. It says Gemara, Mai nimlachu. Each act is its own act. Like we just said, each cup of wine is separate. So each time of tashmish is separate. It's a new act. It's a nimlach. You finished one and you started to do it again. Amar Abai Yochi Kamar Lo Yichal Trei. You should not eat 2. V'yishta trei. Drink 2. V'lo yases rachav. Afilu pam achas domachalosh misrahi. Means after you drink 2 cups, after you eat 2, then you should not do that after one sleeps with their wife, because then he's in a weakened state. After, as the Rashi over here, Dal Machalish speaks out, that you have to be afraid because you're in a weakened state. That's why you should be afraid for the zugais. We'll pick up tomorrow. We'll learn more about this fascinating concept of zugais in tomorrow's daf.